working for me in either one, but Bezrat Hashem, after class, we will get the sheets printed properly. By the way, for any of you that are on the group, I actually sent it to the group. You have it. You shouldn't really have phones in your class, but if you have phones in your class and you're part of our WhatsApp group, you should be able to get the sheets that I sent to the WhatsApp group. As a matter of fact, for those of the people online that are not yet part of the WhatsApp group, don't you push like a button and you give them that thing? What's that thing? Let's give them, if they could join the WhatsApp group, and then they will get to see. Yes, if you click on this, what do you call these things again?
Well, they just point their phone camera
at it. No, there's a name for this stuff. QR code. Right, so if you use the QR code on the screen, you will be able to join our WhatsApp group. And I did put the worksheet on the WhatsApp group already, if you did not notice. All right? Good. Anyways, we have to get some of the boys out of the kitchen. And then we will begin by a brand new Tonu Rabbanon. All right? Tonu Rabbanon. Why is this one not on? Huh? It is on. Good. Okay. Same. Good. Okay. Tonu Rabbanon. Reuven, you ready to go? Okay. So as I've said in the past, Tanu Rabbanon is always a new discussion. Tanu Rabbanon is a very important keyword. It literally means our rabbis taught. In how should I say it? In Gamara terms, it means a Tanaic sage taught. Okay? A Tanaic sage taught the following teaching. It may be on the same topic as the previous discussion, but it is also indicating a new discussion. Last week we had another keyword that indicates a new discussion, which was Iboilahu, or Boy, what was the other one? We had Bo'omine. Bo'omine is from the same word, etc. Why doesn't it show over here, YouTube? We don't have YouTube here?
No, it's on.
It's on, but it doesn't say. I don't know why. Okay, good. Anyways. Good. Okay. So we have a Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught. Essentially, we're going to bring over here, we're going to quote a Tanaic source, and based on that Tanaic source, we are going to start a discussion. Okay, that's what you know when you hit Tanu Rabbanon. Huh? We are on Kuf Vav Amud Aleph, which is 106a, approximately 9 lines from the top. Tanu Rabbanon, it actually over here is an acronym, Tuf Reish. Tuf Reish, which stands for Tanu Rabbanon. All right? Good. The rabbis taught. Now, keep in mind, whenever you hear this, you have to think, what are the rabbis teaching? Right? What are the rabbis teaching? Because we're going to begin to analyze the details of this teaching in this week's Gemara. This week's Gemara, if you've seen the sheets, is relatively short. I had no choice but to make this week's Gemara relatively short, because that's just the way. If our choice would have been to make it a little bit short or to make it extremely long, and I felt it was better to make it a little shorter, and we'll have more time to focus on the concept in depth rather than doing a longer quota and then getting lost. All right?
Yeah.
Good. You're with us? Kenai Nahara. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught as follows: remember the day of the Sabbath to make it holy, which is a quote actually from the Torah itself, which is a quote from the Ten Commandments, right? Remember the day of Sabbath to make it holy. Now, I just told you it's a Tanaic quote, so how can the Tanaic quote be a quote from the Torah? So whenever you see the Tanaic quote is quoting a quote from the Torah, it means that the Tanaic quote is going to quote a verse from the Torah. The Tanaic quote is going to tell you how it analyzes that verse from the Torah, and then the Amaraic quote is going to analyze the analysis. Okay? Makes sense? We're first going to analyze the quote itself. That's the beginning. The Tanaic sages are going to analyze the quote. Then the Amaraic sages are going to analyze that analysis, not to challenge the analysis, because the Amaraic sages will never challenge the Tanaic authority. However, they will analyze to see what else could we learn from the conclusions of their analysis. All right? So in the Torah it says, In the Ten Commandments, we actually have it over here. It is in Shemois Chof Ches, which in the secular way, the Christian way of saying it would say Exodus 28. It says, remember the day of Sabbath to be holy. And it says, Zeichreu al hayayin. So the Tanaic Sage says, what does it mean, remember the day of Sabbath to be holy? It means remember it on the wine. Remember it on the wine, which means that you should have a cup of wine and make a ceremony to remember the Sabbath. It's not good enough to have the Sabbath. You have to actively do something to remember it. And the rabbi said that the definition of that means that you have to make a ceremony on wine, which is essentially declaring your recognition of the Sabbath. Yes?
What if someone can't have wine because they're sober?
Oh, that's a good question. And by the way, this is very common today. Huh?
I mean, this is regarding Shabbos.
It's not easy to be an observant, sober Jew, right? Not easy. Unfortunately, some people that, if you ask me, is it good to be an observant, sober Jew? I'd say no, not a good idea. Now, in certain situations where people, they got so onto alcohol the whole week, and it's really damaging them, and having a little bit of alcohol on Shabbos could trigger something that is not good for their health, then there are other options. And by the way, this week we're going to learn the other options as well. Okay, so let's begin understanding, first we're going to begin understanding the original source, then we're going to analyze this and we're going to bring it down, and your answer will be answered, by the way, later on this week in some of the future lessons that we have. All right?
Yeah.
Good. So again, the rabbis essentially learned from the verse that said, remember the Sabbath, is that it is your responsibility to do a particular action that proclaims your recognition of the Sabbath. That's what it means, remember. You actually have to do something that shows that you are remembering the Sabbath. And what is that? That's on the wine. When you do the blessing on the wine, and then the Kiddush, that is your remembering the Sabbath, essentially fulfilling your biblical obligation. Continues the Tanaic sages. Ein li ela bayoim balayla minayon. I know that you have to remember the day of Sabbath, which means you would have to make some proclamation on the day of Sabbath. What about the night that begins Sabbath? Right? It seems like Zohar is Yom, remember the day. The day could mean literally the daytime. So perhaps that means you need to remember the Sabbath in the daytime. How do you know that you have to actually remember it already in the night when Sabbath starts, the night before? So the Tanaic sage says, Talmud Loimar, it comes to teach you, which Talmud Loimar is a very important keyword. However, this particular keyword is used generally in the Tanaic era, not in the Amoraic era. Talmud Loimar means it comes to teach you, which means that these words in the Torah are specifically there to get you to do the following. Talmud Loimar therefore teaches you, Zochar es Yom HaShabbos lekadshe. Yeah? So therefore it tells you, remember the day of Shabbat to remember it. Now, if you're listening carefully, you should be saying right now, what on earth are you talking about? First I tell you that because it says the day of Shabbat, therefore I'm wondering how I do the night. So how do I know that you have to do Kiddush by night? So I answer you because it says Zachar Yosef Shabbos lekadrei, which was the original verse, which we had the question to begin with, because the original verse seems like the day, right? Now, believe it or not, that's the end of the Tanaic quote, which is very important to realize Yehuda, where the Tanaic quote starts, where it ends, and where the Talmudic sages are going to begin analyzing this particular quote. Okay, so that's the end of the Tanaic quote, but it seems very interesting because first it quotes a verse, and it says, based on this verse, it seems like you only have to do Kiddush during the day, right? How do you know you have to do it the night? And he requotes the same verse. Huh?
Two different things.
They're the same verse.
Still the same verse, but two different.
Yeah, but again, we quoted the verse, then we said, based on this verse, it seems like you'd only have to do it in the day. So it says, well, therefore it tells you the same verse. Right? It's like somebody asks you a question, where are you going? And you look at him back in the face, and you're like, okay, where are you going? Well, that's what I asked you, where are you going? Okay, so where are you going? Yeah, so where are you going? Yeah, sheesh, makes a lot of sense. If you're, I don't know what.
It's like a Zen riddle.
Huh?
It's like a Zen riddle.
A Zen riddle. Anyways, so let's go to the Talmudic sages, and the Talmudic sages are going to begin discussing how this makes sense. So the Talmudic sage says, "Balayla minayin." How do we know you have to do it in the day? Right? Meaning, how do you know? How do you know you have to do it in the night? Sorry, how do you know you have to do it in the night? We just quoted you a verse that says, "Remember the day of Shabbat," not remember the night before going into Shabbat. So the Amaraic says, "Adrabah." On the contrary, Ikar kedusha balayla. The main time to make kiddush is in the night. The Ikar kedusha, the main time to make kiddush is not in the day, but it's in the night. Yeah. Dechi kaddish tchilas yoima boy likidushe. Yeah, because when should you make a proclamation for kiddush? You should make a proclamation for kiddush to be sanctify Shabbat when it begins, right? So since in the Jewish tradition, the day begins at night, right? The night is the beginning of the next day. So therefore, you should make Kiddush when Shabbat starts. And therefore, Shabbat starts in the evening. So therefore, you should make Kiddush in the evening. Right? You need to remember the day of Shabbat. Now, it's a bit of a play on words here because the word day in ancient Hebrew could mean the daytime. But the word day in Hebrew could also mean a 24-hour period. By the way, we use the same thing today, right? When we say in 2 days, do you literally mean in the daytime in 2 days? Not necessarily, because the word day could mean, today we use the same terminology. The word day could mean a 24-hour period, or the word day could mean a daytime. So essentially, the Talmudic sages are saying, well, the reason you have to say Kiddush at night is because it tells you to remember the day of Shabbat, and the day of Shabbat includes 24 hours. And since by the time it gets day, it's already close to 12 hours or more into the day of Shabbat, the 24-hour period of Shabbat, therefore you should be remembering it in the beginning, which is the night going into it. Yeah? Makes sense? Good. So that's basically what we say. That's the reason why we should be saying, not only should we be saying Kiddush the night before, but that's the main time you should be saying Kiddush is the night before, meaning it's not the night before, it's the night that begins Shabbat. Make sense? Good. Excellent. Vitu. And what does Vitu mean? We've had this before. Yeah. The two is actually almost identical to the word in English two. Two and two. Yeah? But not T-O, T-O-O. Which T-O-O means also. And I think it's one of the coolest words in the Gamara because it's literally the only word in the Gemara that I know of that it's literally the exact same word in English and Hebrew. Yeah, they use it a little differently than we use the word T-O-O, but it means the same thing. So the word T-O-O means like also, right? Also, this too, this also. So the two, and furthermore, Balayla minayin. It says, how do we know we should do it at night? Talmud loymar, it says, therefore it teaches us, Zachas yemar yoim, you should remember the day. So the Talmudic sages say, Tana mihader alayla v'konosiv lekro diyamama. Right? How does it make sense that the Tanaic sages are looking for a proof that you need to say Kiddush Friday night, and they're bringing a verse that speaks about the day? Doesn't make any sense. And therefore, the very fact that this is what's going on, the very fact that they actually bring this verse to prove the night, Hachika Amar, therefore it is saying as follows: Zochar Yom HaShabbos lekadishoi. Remember Shabbat to make it holy. Zechreu ala yayin. Remember it on the wine. Bicheni sasei. when you are beginning the Shabbat, that's when you need to have the remembrance on the wine. You need to make a blessing on the wine, and anybody out there that knows that anything about the Jewish people, every Friday night we take a cup of wine, we make kiddush, and we say a blessing on Shabbat, which remembers the day we're proclaiming our recognition of the fact that Shabbat has begun. And it's very important, as we see, it's from the verse itself, the obligation to make a clear proclamation of your remembering Shabbat. It's not good enough just to keep Shabbat, but you got to remember that this is Shabbat. You got to know why you're doing it, and you have to actually bring it to some level of conscious recognition. Makes sense? Good. Ein li'ela b'layla. So therefore it says, from that verse, it seems like you would only have to make Kiddush in the night. B'yoyminayin, how do you know that you make Kiddush also in the day? Talmud loymar, therefore it teaches Zachar es Yoma Shabbos. Therefore it says, remember the day of Shabbos. So it's very interesting because it seems to be a bit repetitive and repeating itself and asking you a question and answering it with the very same question. But we can go over here to the Rashbam, who will explain it. All right? Normally in the first day we don't go straight to the Rashbam, the first day of the quota, but in this case I think it might actually be something good to do. What do you say? Let's do it. Although I don't see too many people with the Gemaras. About half. Half of the guys have a book. Oh, you have the thing over there. Good. Good. Remember, anybody that I did put on the group. I did put on the group the worksheets. If you join the group, you'll get the worksheets in the beginning of the week. If you don't want to know how to join the group, we even have a QR code. We're very fancy today. And if you look at your screen, we'll give you another 20 seconds. Otherwise, we're pulling it off and you lost the chance. Click the QR code on the screen, and then you can join our WhatsApp group, and you can use it or lose it. And don't abuse it.
Yeah.
Yes. Why not? We rhyme today. Okay. Let's go to the Rashbam. The Rashbam says, "Hochi garsinon." It begins. If you look at it's in the medium lines. There are 3 size lines in the Gemara. In the medium lines, you'll see a line that starts lahakpid, and then right after that word lahakpid is the word hochi garsinon, which means this is how we read the Gemara. Now, whenever it says this is how we read the Gemara, it's because there was, unfortunately, different versions of the Gemara itself. This existed. There were different versions of the Gemara. Yeah? And not too different than one another, but very often there was a little bit of mistakes. You have to realize that today, when everything's computerized and mass printing, it is relatively easy to keep a standard version of a text. However, in the olden days when people used to copy it by hand and sometimes by heart, throughout the generations there was various different versions of the same discussion in the Gemara. Right? And therefore Rashi and the Rashbam very often felt it necessary to actually point out this is the correct version and any other version would be the incorrect version. Now, how would Rashi or the Rashbam know what the correct version was? How would they know which one was correct? They also maybe had the wrong version. Right? As a matter of fact, they had numerous versions in front of them, and they're choosing which version is correct. How did they do that? It could be debate, but through analysis. They basically analyze which one is somewhat accurate and makes sense. And if it not, they said that, basically they would throw out one version if it didn't make sense and choose another one. All right, this concept of analyzing and reorganizing versions also, by the way, was in the time of the Talmud. In the time of the Talmud, we see sometimes that the Talmud itself says that the version of the Mishnah is missing some words. Right? as I've said in the past, but I'll say it again, is that when the Jewish people write a Sefer Torah, the one that we use in the synagogue, you are required, a scribe is required to write it from the text. He is not allowed to write a Sefer Torah from memory. He's not allowed to. It's not considered a Torah if it's written by memory. However, the other texts of Judaism, such as the Talmud, they could possibly be written by memory. Right? There was no rule against it, and therefore many people did write the Talmud by memory and the Mishnah by memory, and that's why throughout the generations there could be various different wordings here and there between the versions. All right? Now, the Rashbam says, Hachi Garsinan, this is the correct version. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Zachras Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshu, remember the day of Shabbat to make it holy. Zeichreu Al Yain, remember it on the wine. Ein Li Ela Bayoin. You see how he switches it. This only proves by day, Balayla Minayin, how would we know by night? Now, the version of the Rashbam is different than the version we have over here. Now, the version of the Rashbam seems to make more sense. Because the version that we had says, it says, Zachar Siyam HaShabbos L'Kadshe, remember it on the wine, right? This proves that you have to do it at night. How do we know by day? But then it repeats the same verse to prove the same thing over and over. Like I told you, it doesn't make sense. So, the Rashbam says the reason why it doesn't make sense is because that's actually not what the Tanaic sages say. They said it the exact opposite way. They first started out by saying this proves that you have to make Kiddush by day. Then they asked, how do you know that you have to do it by night? Talmud Leimer Zacharis Yom HaShabbos. Remember the day of Shabbos. Balayla Minayin. So then he said, well, how does that prove by night? Adrab, Ikar Kiddush Balayla. So it says the main time to make Kiddush is by night. Who the Chi Kaddish Yoma, because when the day begins, Boile Kiddushi, you have to make it holy. You have to make the proclamation of Kiddush, the two. And furthermore, Balayla Minayin, how do we know that you have to do it by night? Talmud Leimer therefore teaches you Zachar Siyam HaShabbos, Zachar Siyam HaShabbos. Now the Gemara is asking, Tana Mahadar Alayla v'Nasas Bakrali Mama. How is why on earth would the Tana bring a verse that references the day to prove that you have to make Kiddush at night? The Nasiv is kind of like it brings. Yeah. Yeah, in this case. Hachi Gamara, Zachar Siyam HaShabbos L'Kadshu, Zeichreu Al Yain B'Chini Sasei, Ein Li Ela Balayla V'Chulu. Right? Meaning that it's using this word to remember the day of Shabbat means that you need to remember it as soon as it starts. Right? And that's essentially how it's learning it out from the verse, even though it's a little bit shaky, but that's the way it is. That's the way we do it. Yeah, and it uses the word lekadeshoy to make it holy. So he says, the Rashbam says that when's to make it holy? Well, in order to make it holy, you have to make it holy when it starts, not halfway through. Because then you're only making half of it holy. You're not making the whole thing holy. Right? So therefore, if it says, remember the Shabbat to make it holy, well, remember the Shabbat as soon as it starts. Do a formal remembrance, which is the Kiddush blessing, to show that you're recognizing that Shabbat has in fact begun. Any questions?
Say it again.
Huh?
Can we say it again?
Say what again?
What you just said. Again.
Essentially, if you look at the wording seems a bit peculiar, and how exactly are the Tanaic sages learning it from that verse? Okay? The Rashbam is essentially saying they're learning it from the word lekadeshoy to make it holy. Now, if you're going to make the day of Shabbat holy, it wouldn't make sense to make it holy halfway through. It would only make sense to make it holy when it actually becomes holy. As a matter of fact, it's using a bit of a pun on the word. Perhaps it could be mashma that it's the word kadosh, which we use for holy, or lekadesh, to make holy. The word actually means separate, right? Now, why are we saying God is holy or God's separate? Because we're trying to say that he's a reality beyond, completely separate from our ability to comprehend, right? So something's holy means it's something beyond what we can possess, what we can, what would be the word?
Comprehend?
Well, something that we can comprehend, grasp. Right? Again, if we can grasp it, then it's not separate from us. And therefore it's not holy, right? I don't know where the word holy comes from in the English language. Holy is a piece of holes. I don't know what a hole is. It sounds like a holes. What's the word holy? That's a lot of, huh? But what is the word huh? Yeah. It comes from the word whole. Then why isn't it spelled with a W? Oh. If only we analyze the English language like we did in the Talmud, it'll get destroyed. It will get destroyed. No, it's a very Talmudic answer. If it was about whole, if holy is from the word whole, right, then it would be spelled with a W, not with an H. Because a whole, like a whole thing, is with a W. As a matter of fact, a hole with an H is like a hole in the ground. Is a holy, right?
The definition of holy is dedicated or consecrated to a Shem or a religious purpose.
Right. So basically, the way that we use the word holy in English language, it means something divine. However, in ancient Hebrew, the word holy really means separate, which means that it's like beyond. If you want to say it's beyond us, in English you say it's beyond us. So the word separate, kadosh, is kind of like it's beyond, right? Now, the word kadosh could mean its figurative meaning of holy, like divine, but the word kadosh could also mean the word separate, to separate, right? Now, as a matter of fact, anybody that knows the Jewish marriage ceremony, anybody remember the last time they were at a Jewish wedding? What do we say? The groom says to the bride, says, Harei at mikudeshes li, you are mikudeshes li, you are whatever. Some people translate it, you are holy to me, right? Because they use the word kadosh, mikudeshes li, you are holy to me. That's actually not the true meaning of that declaration. The true meaning of the declaration by the wedding is that you are separate from me. Meaning you are now separate from me. In English you would say exclusive to me, which means you are separated from all mankind, that you're basically agreeing, the woman is agreeing that she will separate herself from all men in the world except for her husband. She's separating from the rest of the world. Prior to then, she could have married anybody in the whole world. Right? And now she's agreeing that she cannot marry anybody in the whole world. Her husband now kind of owns that right. And she is selling him her rights to be with anybody else other than him. Right? It's actually a sale. In Christian world, the marriage is a vow. In the Jewish world, it's actually a sale. Right? The Jewish woman is not selling herself. People get this confused. She is not selling herself. The man does not own the body of the woman. He owns her right to be with anyone other than him. Right? But he buys that right. He gives her something in exchange for her selling her rights to be with any man. And now she can only be with him and no one else. And the word is mikudeshes, which really means separate. You are separate for me, which means you are separated from the rest of the world, and now you're exclusively for me and no one else. That is actually the true meaning of the Jewish marriage. Now we use the word mikudeshes, and so a lot of people, unfortunately, some rabbis even that try to make as if they know Hebrew, they say, you are becoming holy for me. No, you're not. I mean, you're coming holy because you married me. Now all of a sudden you're going to be holy, right? If you married me, I don't know how holy you'd be, but I don't know. Maybe I'm whatever. But I have to be pretty holy to make you holy just for marrying me, But it's actually a false translation. It's not the true translation. It's making holy. The true translation is that the woman is becoming exclusive to the man. That is the true definition. And again, it comes from the word separate. You're separating yourself from me. Yes?
The word holy without W is rooted in the word whole.
Yeah, it is.
One of the definitions.
It means that the English language is totally messed up and they can't figure out how they want to spell things. Huh?
Also to whole. W-O-L-E.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It is? They lost the W. They just threw it out.
Both holy meaning.
Yeah, we have. You see, whatever I say, by the way, we have people challenging me in the class. They go on the line. They go on the. All right, so he says, Yehuda says that the word holy in English actually comes from the word whole, like wholesome, complete. By the way, I think when you spell wholesome, is wholesome spelled with an H or no? It is spelled with an H. Wholesome is spelled with an H, right? So essentially what you're saying, the word holy is like wholesome. It's like wholesome.
Not needing anything additional to make it complete.
Right, but the way we use it is definitely not like that. How do we go back to, just in case somebody's asking something here? Yeah. Oh, we do have a lot over here. Can I know how to? Yes. Anybody interesting? Any interesting comments? By the way, if people comment from online, we will answer the question live only if it's relevant to the conversation. We're not going. In the past, we went on to other things, and then Ruvain over here runs away. He's like, I can't dare listen to anything other than Gamara. I'm so dedicated to my Gamara studies. You speak about anything else, I'm out of here. So, okay, good. Anyways, we got some harsh language over there, man. Look at this. Huh? Not ones that I would want to repeat in class. Well, it's for now. Anyways, let's continue. This one says thanks to God, or thanks to.
Thanks be to God.
Oh, thanks be to God. Okay, that's a good thing to say. Thanks be to God from Nick Lim. All right. Where are we? Back to the holy. So again, the word holy could be separate, right? That's actually the root word of holy. By the way, I don't know why in English holy would be like wholesome. Like why? What the way we use it is more like exalted. Is something exalted whole? Just because it's divine, just because it's spiritual, mean it's whole? Not necessarily. There are spiritual realities that aren't whole. God is whole. Yeah, we're talking about the definition of the true creator, the essence of godliness is the completion of everything. Very nice. But there's many levels of spirituality in between that are not necessarily whole. And by the way, could you be holy? You can be whole and wholesome in this world without being divine. You could also be whole and have a wholesome life. Why not? So again, in ancient Hebrew, the word kadosh, which very often is translated to holy, really comes from the word separate. And therefore, the word separate in our context could mean when the day separates, right? Which means when Friday separates from Saturday, now it becomes holy. So lekadeshoi, to make it holy, could also mean to separate it, which means when it separates, you should make this proclamation. So that's essentially what the Rashbam is saying, because the literal word kadosh means separated. So as soon as the day of Friday is separate from Shabbat, which means the second Shabbat separates itself from Friday, you should be making kiddush. And that's the way we do it today in the Jewish world. We make kiddush, we make the proclamation as soon as possible. And that is the basis of this, yeah?
Don't the rabbis, doesn't everybody know that Shabbat starts on, the day starts at night?
Who's everybody? Everybody in the whole world knows that the day starts at night. How do you know? How says everybody knows that? Okay, so you're saying that if a person is an observant Jew, you're saying if an observant Jew doesn't know that the day... Okay, so if it's an observant Jew should probably know that the day starts in the night. But I hate to break it to you, Yehuda, not everybody's an observant Jew.
But here, in the context of the Gemara, they know that the day starts with the Arvit. Everybody knows that. So
yeah, but perhaps the word day actually means the daytime. And that's why he's saying, and that's why the Rashbam is using the word lekadeshoi to make it holy, or which literally means to separate it. So if you want to separate it from the rest of the week, you separate it as soon as it separates itself, you should proclaim that it is separate. You understand? Because that's essentially what the Rashbam is saying, meaning the word's not from yoim, from the word day, it's from the word likadeshoi, to make it holy, which literally means to separate it. You want to separate it from the rest of the week. You want to say that this day is uniquely, divinely inspired versus the rest of the days of the week. Therefore, when should you be proclaiming it? When it becomes separate. When it becomes separate from the rest of the week, which is Friday evening, that's when you should be making this proclamation of Kiddush. Yeah? You will read the Rashbam. For those of you who feel that you are qualified to do so, you should read the Rashbam. And the Rashbam will bring various details in this discussion, etc. Yeah? Yeah. Now the Gemara is going to go to another question, which I don't want to go too much into. I think maybe we'll leave that for tomorrow's class. Is that we go into another question. Now we know from this verse that you need to say Kiddush, the night, Friday night, which starts the Sabbath. Bayoiminayim. How do you know that you should make Kiddush in the day as well? Now those of you who were here last week are probably looking at me. We discussed last week that you don't need to make Kiddush in the day. This week we're going to basically learn the source for why the Jewish people actually say Kiddush today. And what is the reason we say Kiddush today? Because this Gemara said so. There is actually a concept of saying Kiddush during the daytime. Right? So how do we know? So the question of the Gemara, how do we know that you should make Kiddush in the day as well? Talmud Leimer Zachars Yoim HaShabbos. So now we're using the word day. If you look carefully at the quote, the word Lekadishay is gone. Now you can look at the Rashbam and understand what the Rashbam is saying. The Rashbam is saying that from the word Lekadishay, right? From the word Lekadishay, we know that you need to proclaim its separation. When it separates, when it becomes Shabbat. But think about it. It could have said, remember Sabbath to make it holy. It doesn't have to say, remember the day of Sabbath. And since it adds that word, remember the day of Sabbath, so because it says the word lekadishay, which means when it separates, that means when it becomes separate. But now that we determined that you have to make Kiddush Friday night, the word yoim is superfluous, and there is no extra word in the entire Torah. There's no such thing as an extra word in the Torah. It's one of the bases of Jewish theology, is that there is no extra word in the Torah, and if you could have said a particular statement or taught a particular rule without using a particular word, it would have. And the very fact that it used a word that was not necessary is coming to teach you something new, right? Because otherwise it wouldn't be there. So comes the Talmud and it says, well, it could have said, remember Sabbath to make it holy. And then we would say to make it holy when it, meaning to separate it when it becomes separate. Why does it say remember the day of Sabbath? Comes to really teach you two separate things. Number one, you need to make Kiddush Friday night. And number two, you need to make Kiddush Shabbos day. Meaning you need to make a proclamation both in the night and in the day. And that's why these words were there.
So why are the Kiddushes different the night and the day? Less than common.
Oh, very good. That is brilliant. So now the Gemara is going to continue and say, B'yoy mai mevorich. What in fact is the blessing during the day? Omar Rabbi Yehuda says, Boide pri hagafen. You just make the blessing on the wine. Boide pri hagafen. You thank God for giving you a cup of wine, and that is the kiddush, the sanctification of the day. The very fact that you drink a cup of wine just for the purpose of honoring Shabbat is in fact this concept of kiddush. Right? And if you look, that's why Friday night, the blessing of Kiddush is actually a clear proclamation of Shabbat. However, in the day, you're not proclaiming Shabbat. Right? Even though today many people read the verses of Shabbat when they make Kiddush, we read Zachros Yom HaShabbos L'Kaddish Sheish Yom Tav L'Sisel Kol Melachtecha V'Yom HaShvi Shabbos L'Havaya L'Kecha Lo Yisasecha Molocha Ato V'Inchu V'Terav T'Chamas M'Tech V'Gerch Hashem Yishanecha Ki Sheish Yom Mosa Havaya S'Shamayim V'Zaros Yom Shkol Asher Bom V'Yonach B'Yom HaShvi Al Kein Berach Hashem. Yeah, anyways, you are not, if you look in the Kiddush of the day, First of all, there is no blessing that's unique to the day Kiddush. There is no blessing that's unique to the day of Kiddush. We say a few verses. Why? Because we're trying to show that this is in honor of Shabbat. But we're not clearly remembering the Shabbat. However, in the night, Friday night, we have a special blessing honoring that special blessing about Shabbos, and it actually proclaims your recognition for it. We say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvah shevorotza banu, as God has made us holy and commanded us, and He wanted us. He desired our services. Shabbos Kodshei, and this holy Sabbath, ba'ava v'ratzim yichilanu, He basically gave us this Sabbath as an inheritance. Zikaron l'ma'aseh v'reish is to remember the days of creation. Chilul mikroi kodesh, which is the beginning for holy callings. Zeichel l'tzias Mitzrayim, and is also a remembrance for the leaving of Egypt, etc., etc., etc. Okay, I'm not going to get into the details, but on Friday night we actually make a clear kiddush, which means there's an official blessing proclaiming your recognition of the Shabbos. In the day there's not. And by the way, even though we say Zachar Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshay, all that were later additions. It was not part of the initial rabbinic establishment. The original rabbinic establishment, you say Beire Pri HaGofen, and that's it. As a matter of fact, if you say I'm too lazy, I'm not reading the whole Zachar Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshay, and all you do is you pick up the wine and you say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Beire Pri HaGofen, you in fact have fulfilled your obligation for saying Kiddush on Shabbat day. You fulfilled it. You're good to go. There, you're done. Right? And where do we get that from? Our Gemara. Right? Now, we're going to continue in this a little later. Right? But for now, we're going to go to studying on your own. And our new student, what's your name again? Avi. Avi will also. I'm gonna have a short meeting with you over here to give you a bit of introduction to the program. We'll put back on our link just for a few seconds. Yes. So right now we're going to continue learning. I will try my best to get you the sheets, but if I don't get you the sheets, please try to learn it without the sheets. Those of you who illegally are using your phones during my class, you have it. You should have it on the WhatsApp group already. And for now, let's bring Mashiach and. For anybody that wants, on the screen, there's a QR code to join our WhatsApp group, and then you can get the sheets as well. You also will get reminders, usually if we remember to do so, when the class starts. Otherwise, try to find us. We're usually here on Sunday through Thursday at 11, sometimes at 11:15, depending on when the prayer finishes. All right, we'll see you at another time. Thank you for your participation, and that's it.